As the incumbent Ward 6 councillor Natalie Harris is not seeking re-election, on October 24th, voters will elect a new councillor. Two of the Ward 6 candidates, Allan Bray and Sharon Doran, participated in a debate organized by Engage Barrie. Sharon Doran worked for Honda of Canada for 30 years in different positions before retiring last year. She volunteers her time with Business and Professional Women of Barrie, Feline Fix, Ryan's Hope, and Ripple of Kindness. Her top three priorities are growth and sustainable development, affordable housing, and people, including seniors. Allan Bray, who is also recently retired, worked as an engineer in the automotive industry for 31 years. Bray has been working as a scout leader for the past 15 years. His top three priorities are to limit tax increases, to improve speeding and safety, and to attract industry. The debate was moderated by Rob Romanek, a director and interim chair of Engage Barrie.
Thank you again for joining us this evening, Allan and Sharon. We've already actually done this presentation once, but unfortunately the recording did not come through properly. So Allan and Sharon have graciously accepted to come back on and give the responses again. So the responses may not be exactly what the people heard live before, but they're both such great speakers that I'm sure they will be very, very close. So let's jump right into it. And I will just get my sheets here. So we're going to start with a short introduction from our two candidates who are attending this evening, Sharon and Allan. So Sharon, we'll get you to introduce yourself first.
Thanks very much, Rob. Good evening, and thank you to everyone involved in making this event happen, despite some unusual circumstances. My name is Sharon Doran. I'm a candidate for Ward 6 councillor in beautiful Barrie, Ontario. I retired last year from Honda of Canada's production management team. I started my career in 1991 as a receptionist, and 30 years later retired as the engine plant administration leader, responsible for associate relations and engagement, training and development, production supply procurement, and cost analysis for a budget in excess of $100 million annually. And when they were really desperate, I worked online. On the community front, I'm a board member of the Business and Professional Women of Barrie, a volunteer with Feline Fix, a local animal rescue group, and with Ryan's Hope, feeding breakfast to downtown Barrie's unhoused community. I'm a proud Ripple of Kindness member, an organization that recently celebrated its 6th anniversary and has donated over $500,000 to local charities and nonprofit groups in that short time. I'm running for Ward 6 councillor because I am passionate about Barrie and its future. 4 generations of my family live here today, from my 87-year-old mother down to my 2-year-old granddaughter. My husband Rick and I have lived on Dove Crescent in Ward 6 for 26 years. My top 3 issues are growth and sustainable development, affordable housing, and people, including seniors, youth, and everyone in between. My work and volunteer experience has given me a uniquely balanced viewpoint that will allow me to work collaboratively with council, city staff, and local experts to make sound decisions today that are sustainable for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Actually, we have a few attendees that have signed up late to our session, and they're going to get to see the whole thing. For the people attending, we unfortunately had some recording issues before, and we are actually restarting the process. So Sharon, thank you for your introduction. Allan, if you can introduce yourself now, please. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to thank CARP and Engage Barrie for hosting this event. My name is Allan Bray. I'm a recently retired engineer and manager with 31 years of experience in automotive manufacturing, materials engineering, people management, and project management. I've been a scout leader for the past 15 years, and I'm currently the group commissioner of two groups in the south end of Barrie. Previously, I was the area commissioner. In this role, I was responsible for serving 20 scout groups within and outside of our county. I'm running for councillor because I have a background and skills to serve my fellow Ward 6 residents very well, and true to my scouting background, I feel I have a duty to serve. My first priority as councillor is to limit tax increases and ensure that we are getting value for money. My second priority is speeding and safety. Ward 6 has 2 primary arterial roads and increasing traffic on feeder and residential roads. I intend to work with city operations and police to identify and implement sustainable solutions to discourage speeding. My third priority is to attract industry and to provide valuable local careers. More local employment has many benefits to the city, to our residents, and to our environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Now we will have both candidates respond to 3 pre-sent questions, which they've had time to review and formulate a response for. We'll start with, sorry, I didn't click the video button. We will start with a question about housing. And the question is, access to affordable quality housing is a fundamental human right, which affects our physical and mental health, prosperity, and community. The City of Barrie's Housing Affordability Task Force report has given us a blueprint of how to tackle the housing crisis. Which of these recommendations would you prioritize? And how do you intend to support housing development in a way that addresses the needs of all income levels, abilities, ages, and stages, while also being environmentally responsible and working towards more diverse, integrated community building?
Okay, thank you for the question. Referencing the City of Barrie's Housing Affordability Task Force report, I prioritize funding a senior staff member dedicated to delivery of the affordable housing strategy and implementing regular housing stock monitoring. I would also prioritize exempting certain classes of development just to speed them along, provided that safety and neighborhood integration are not compromised. I would also prioritize the adoption of innovative building practices and ideas such as tiny homes and the conversion of hotels and motels where possible. Innovative practices would also allow the reduction of our per capita carbon footprint. I'm not opposed to it, but we do need to be careful with planning more housing on industrial zoned property. Barrie also needs to boost local employment, and there's already limited available land for greenfield industrial sites. I support building primarily medium to high density housing to accommodate the planned population growth within the available land. We also need to build walkable communities. Along with increasing local employment, this will reduce our dependence on cars, which will further reduce our carbon footprint, promotes active and healthy living, and strengthens the community for everybody. Real estate speculation is another factor driving up prices in our market. To reduce speculation in our housing market, I would propose a vacant homes tax of 3 to 5% of assessed value, similar to what is being done in Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Sharon, sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you for the question. I grew up in the Jane and Finch community of North York in the 1970s and have firsthand experience of the need for affordable and social housing, as well as the importance of integration of all housing types within existing and new communities. I'm also passionate about ensuring that housing is accessible for people of all ages and ability. The City of Barrie's Housing Affordability Task Force final report provided a number of excellent recommendations that I wholeheartedly support, some of which have already been implemented by the current council. I would work with council, city staff, and local experts such as Redwood Communities to prioritize the following 3 points. Collaborating with commercial property owners to plan residential intensification sites in Barrie, such as the Bayfield Mall. Work with federal, provincial, and county governments to map all publicly owned lands in Barrie and request that appropriate sites be offered to nonprofit and charitable housing providers and builders, and to pursue potential hotel and motel conversions to create supportive housing community, similar to Lucy's Place on Essa Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. Okay, so we'll move on to our next question, which is in the topic of youth. What plans do you have for attracting and retaining more young people to and in our city, including plans for ensuring a more inclusive, vibrant, and sustainable environment for them? How will you attract the quality and well-paying employment opportunities to help give them a more secure future? And what programs and services can the city provide to help them build their skills and support young entrepreneurship? And with young people, we're referring to people in their late teens, 20s, and early 30s. Sharon, you'll be going first. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Canada's birth rate has fallen to an all-time low, so that we are no longer replacing our existing population, and our average age is climbing. In 2015, we reached the tipping point where seniors over 65 outnumbered children under 15, and that gap is widening every year. This means that a large percentage of new Barrie youth will also be new Canadians. We must therefore ensure that Barrie is a warm and welcoming place for them. If elected, I will work with council, city staff, and local partners such as Youth Haven and Ethnic Mosaic Alliance to establish a youth advisory council to get direct feedback on issues that are important to them, to recognize the co-benefits of an affordable housing strategy, reducing poverty, and improving our public transportation network, and to work with employers and entrepreneurs to provide high-paying jobs close to home and the training and resources to land them. And finally, to work with local groups to provide multicultural events, programming, and support to our newcomers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Allan, your response, please.
Okay. Young people will move to where they can afford to live or to be close to work. As a city, we should make Barrie the place that checks both of those boxes. So it is necessary to make housing more affordable and to increase local employment opportunities in valuable, high-quality careers. I have talked about the actions I would take to reduce the cost of housing, and this is what I would do to improve local employment opportunities. Over and above the existing opportunities for startup grants through the city, I would propose a 3-year exemption from property taxes for new business in Barrie. This is to minimize the startup costs of operating a brick and mortar business. I would also form a committee tasked with seeking corporations looking to expand operations and preparing proposals to make our city their location of choice. A very common concern now is the lack of family doctors in Barrie. We need to make Barrie an attractive place for family practitioners. To that end, I would propose mandating the inclusion of office space for newly graduated family doctors in every new commercial or mixed-use building to be provided for free until that need is met. With young people come young families, and so access to community programs is also needed. I would support the construction of new community centers to meet the growing demand and prepare for the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Allan. With that, we're going to move on to our third question, which is related to growth. Looking forward and beyond Barrie's housing concerns, how will you handle the growth of our population and the opportunities and challenges this can generate? What are your 3 priorities to make our community more equitable, safe, and affordable for all residents as we grow, while providing the infrastructure, public transportation, green space, recreation, and other city services required by this increasing population? And how will you work towards eliminating systemic barriers, including race, gender, ability, age, and economic status, to ensure Barrie is a safe and welcoming city for all residents? Allan, if you can answer first, please.
Okay, thank you. Earlier, I touched on the idea of walkable communities. With additional growth, an emphasis needs to be put on making it practical and safe to walk or ride a bicycle for everyday errands. In addition, our transit operations need to be revised to make it a viable option to taking the car for everyone, instead of just being the only option for people who don't have a car. Further, I would support investigating innovative, affordable personal transportation, such as public electric scooter rentals, which offer potentially carbon neutral, affordable alternatives to cars. Growth can only be supported by more affordable housing, so the steps I described earlier must be a keystone for any growth plan. This includes construction of more medium and high density residential units instead of detached single-family homes. Growth in population must also be accompanied by growth in local employment. For too long, Barrie's population has grown while local employment outside of the service and retail industries has stalled. Barrie as a city should strive to be self-contained, with few residents leaving daily to work elsewhere. This will improve quality of life and reduce our carbon footprint. And as I mentioned, I would take steps to attract new family doctors to Barrie. The demand is only going to increase with more young people moving into the city and with a growing aging population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Sharon, your response, please.
Thank you for that question. Barrie is strategically important as an Ontario regional centre, and our population is expected to double from 150,000 today to 300,000 by 2051. City Council adopted the latest official plan in February after 4 years of consultation. The plan clearly lays out a methodical approach for managing our growth while ensuring that we create healthy, complete, and safe communities, that we ensure design excellence, connectivity, and mobility while enshrining our natural heritage system. It also touches on policies that encourage economic prosperity and growth while encouraging a vibrant and diverse culture. I've gone through the official plan a few times, all 230 pages of it, to educate myself and to answer questions received from residents. What resonates the most for me is that we are finally moving away from the car-centric urban sprawl to greener and more livable city that offers shops and restaurants within a 15-minute walk. If elected, I will champion this official plan during all development discussions that come before council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those well thought out answers. We received numerous questions from the audience, and we'd like to take this time to go through your responses to those questions. The first question that I'm going to start with, let's get my list up here, is related to arts and culture. The City of Barrie is on the cusp of investing in an asset that will boost the economy and will be a benefit to all Barrie residents for decades to come. That is the building of a performing arts center. With a performing arts center, professional entertainment of all kinds will arrive at our doorstep year-round, while also being used for community performances and activities. It will cost the taxpayer less to run on a percentage basis than our city's sports and recreation services. What position will you take with respect to the completion of the proposed 3-space performing arts center for Barrie? Sharon, if you can answer first, please.
Thank you for that question. I think it's essential that Barrie has an event space of this kind. We are moving towards being a medium-sized city by 2051. And again, we want to keep our people here. We want them to be able to have arts and culture right here, concerts, events of all natures, dance performances, theater performances. We would like to, of course, make sure that the funding is in place from all levels of government, as well as perhaps any individual donors. But if the costing is there and it makes sense, I would be all for this event space. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Allan, your turn.
Okay. So my feeling is that Barrie would be served well by a large performing arts center, which would be a draw for residents for now and into the future. However, such a performing arts center would need to be economically feasible. Taxpayers should not bear the cost to any significant degree, and it needs to be fully utilized. By this, I mean that apart from funding, both from federal, provincial governments, and to an extent from the municipal government, it does need to maintain, as a minimum, a very small amount on our tax bills. And it needs to be essentially self-sustaining. I think this is very important. I mean, for myself personally as well, when our girls were younger, we used to take them down to the Toronto Symphony Orchestra for their youth concert series, and going to the Nutcracker at what has been variously the O'Keefe Center, then the Hummingbird Center, and the Sony Center, and now it's the Meridian Center for Performing Arts. I can't keep track of it, but anyways, point being, there's a lot of opportunities for live cultural events that Barrie is not leveraging. This would be great to have more of this in town. We do have a symphony orchestra in Barrie. I've seen them perform, and this was out at the Highway Pentecostal Church several years ago. This was through scouting, actually, that we saw them. And so the resources are there in terms of performers. And I think it's very important that we have a premier facility for them to actually perform, both for music, live theater, you name it. A facility like this would go a long way to making Barrie the place to be for now and into the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Allan. So we have a question that came in from a registered nurse lives in your ward, and it's considering the pandemic that we have just experienced. What do you think we as a city have learned, and how do you think we can respond in the future, especially considering issues like the closing of parks and the effect that that had? Allan, if you can start, please.
So let me start off by saying, and no shock to anyone, the pandemic itself was, I want to say unprecedented, but certainly unprecedented in our lifetimes. But I think everyone understands that pandemics like this are becoming a more and more plausible reality, just by the very nature of our society and the way that pardon me for the distraction, by the way that it's actually becoming more connected country to country, and the population itself is growing. With that said, we do need to be prepared for the next events. And this has been a tremendous learning experience for us all. I can't speak highly enough of the public health nurses and healthcare professionals in all fields in their support and helping us get through the worst of the pandemic. It's very important that we now reflect on what worked and what didn't work. Everybody was very quick on their feet. Of course, there were things that didn't work out as well as others. And I think it's important that we are not critical of individuals. I think it's important that we are critical and unbiased in evaluating what truly did work and what didn't work by data. With that, then we can formulate an effective strategy moving forward for the next event so that we know what to do when, how to respond, what works, what doesn't work. I think that's very important, this reflection part. It's key to anything. We've had a tremendous learning experience here, and I think that we need to learn from it as best we can before something worse comes down the pipe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sharon, if you can answer, please.
Yes, thank you for this question. And thank you to all healthcare professionals who have been nothing short of heroic for the last 2.5 years and who continue to do that through our current shortages, staff shortages, and crumbling, some would say, of our healthcare structure. While we are still experiencing COVID, we know that for a fact. As Allan said, it is now time to take a step back, to look at the data, to review our response, and where we could have done better, where we did a good job. We know that we learned as we went, as things like closing parks. We now know that, well, probably that wasn't maybe necessarily 100% necessary. Outdoors is the best place to be in this situation. We learned as we went. We listened to the experts from the World Health Organization, from our federal and provincial health ministers and doctors and panels. And, we really just need to take a look and determine where we did a good job, where we could have improved, and be ready for the next situation. Because again, as Allan said, we're not through this yet, and there could be something else coming down the road. So again, my thanks to all healthcare professionals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. The next question we're going to ask is, as a councillor, what will you do to make sure the public is listened to and involved with local decision making? Sharon, if you can go first, please. You're on mute, Sharon.
So to tell a little story here, immediately following the October 2018 election, Barrie had just one woman and no Black, Indigenous, or councillors of color. I distinctly remember that moment, looking at a photo, being so disappointed and thinking, is this really the best that Barrie can do? Thankfully, in February of 2020, the number of women doubled to 2. thanks to Anne-Marie Kungle winning a Ward 3 by-election and bringing her much-needed Kungle Cares vibe to the team. This election, I'm happy to see more diversity in candidates, but still not nearly enough. And why would residents be engaged if they don't see themselves represented on council? If elected, I will work with council, city staff, and community partners such as Engage Barrie and Ethnic Mosaic Alliance to support workshops and webinars designed to encourage more women and diverse candidates in future elections, and to encourage resident engagement with tools such as regular town halls and surveys, participatory budgeting, and consultations about local challenges and solutions. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Allan.
Okay, so for my part, I feel that it's necessary to have quarterly ward meetings. The reason I feel this is that, I mean, a lot of the communication that you get through by telephone or text or email or even Zoom can be really one-dimensional. I think it's very important to actually be able to meet with people as people and talk to them in an in-person setting. These Ward 6 council meetings, as I said, they'd be quarterly, and my intention would be, first of all, to review what the city of Barrie is doing that relates to Ward 6, and more broadly speaking, that relates to them as citizens of the city. Gather people's feedback, have a dialogue with them. If there's things that are unclear, if there's questions that I need to take back, then that's a prime opportunity to do that. And most important of all is actually getting to know everyone in the ward. I think it's very important to try and engage people one-to-one, because I think the potential exists that, you know, if the only person that you're hearing from are people who have a keyboard and an agenda in mind, it's very easy to lose sight of what other people want. And I want to make sure that everybody is well represented as I speak for Ward 6 in City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question I'm going to ask is about climate change. Given that the city of Barrie has declared a climate emergency in 2019 and a specific climate action policy, what specific climate action policy will you champion that will have an immediate impact on reducing GHG emissions within our city operations? Allan, please.
Okay. Pardon me. So I already spoke to increasing local employment, building walkable communities, improving transit, and seeking other means to reduce dependence on cars. And of course, as councillor, I don't make all those things magically happen. Rather, I support actions to push things in that direction. But there's a lot of other things that we can do. The city of Barrie already has a plan in place with regards to mitigation. So acknowledging that already we're on track to exceed, 1.5 degree temperature increase on our way to 2 degrees, and really barring some sort of drastic turnaround globally, this is what we're going to have to deal with. And so having plans in place to deal with what we know is coming down the pipe and being prepared for the unknowns that come with that, I think is core to the city's planning. And I would support any activities, including things like, well, I mean, a very good point is actually the building straps that would have been effective on keeping roofs on houses when we had a tornado roll through the southeast end of Barrie a couple of years ago. So things like that could be encoded into how we do things to make our communities more resilient, I think are very important. Now, in terms of what else would we do? Well, I mean, there is a whole host of things that we could do. I'm picking one, but I'm not going to say that this is the only one. Concrete is one of our most fundamental building materials. The production of Portland cement, which is the key constituent of concrete, involves roughly 0.9 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every kilogram of Portland cement produced. This is a large contributor to greenhouse gas emissions globally. And so while we can't just eliminate concrete, the city can, one, where possible, find alternatives to concrete. And where concrete is necessary, the city can promote the use of other materials in concrete to reduce its carbon footprint, providing that safety and durability are not compromised. There is research out there, there is evidence out there, there is materials out there that will help reduce the carbon footprint of concrete itself. And I think that where the city can nudge our constructors in that direction for city planned projects, I think that's the way we should go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Sharon.
Thank you for the question. According to the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Barrie will have a climate similar to Ohio by 2030, Kentucky by 2050, and Mississippi by 2080. We need a strong climate action plan that focuses on mitigation and adaptation and provides a blueprint to make our community more transportation and energy resilient. The official plan adopted in February goes a long way to addressing climate change and housing affordability, with housing intensification and increasing community walkability and encouraging public transit, but more can and should be done. If elected, I will work with council, city staff, and community partners to ensure that all council decisions are passed through a climate lens, perhaps even assigning a score. Does this increase carbon emissions or reduce them? Will this remove or add land that sequesters carbon, prevents flooding, and reduces air temperature? And if not, determine how to mitigate those impacts. Thank you for the question.
Thanks very much, Sharon. The question that we're going to discuss now is about workplace safety. It is common to believe that municipally elected officials are accountable to violence and harassment in the workplace policies. However, this is not the case. A bill called Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act was brought forward to introduce provincial legislation that would deter municipal councillors and board members from engaging in harassment by holding them to account for their actions, but it was not passed before the provincial election. It has since been reintroduced as Bill 5. Do you support this bill? And if elected, what would you do to support it? Sharon, please.
Thank you. That's a great question. I actually attended a silent protest at City Hall. I thought it was last week, but it may have been 2 weeks ago now, the last council meeting where we encouraged City Hall, our council, to take a stand for the second time. They had already done so last spring. They had sent a letter endorsing Bill 5, which had a different name at that point, unanimously saying that they 100% agreed with the concept that municipal leaders, like any other supervisors, leaders, managers in Ontario, should be held accountable and up to and including dismissal of their position. Currently, that is not in place. It's hard to believe in 2022 that that's the case, but it's not. And I was very gratified to see that council did again in this most recent council meeting approve the motion to send a second letter of support to the provincial government, because of course this is a provincial issue in terms of they set the municipal act that guides municipal politics and all of the everything around elections or how we operate. So it has to come from them. They have to get this approved, and they need to do it quickly. So what I would do as a member of council, we've already sent our official position paper to the provincial government. I would urge all constituents within Barrie and beyond to get in touch with their MPPs to make sure they know that this needs to pass. And it's a bill that's come forward independently, not from the the PCs who are currently in power, but it's a win for everybody. It's a win for workers and for leaders alike to have this framework in place. So yes, I strongly support Bill 5. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Allan, please.
Yeah, so when I first looked up Bill 5, just to understand what is this about, I have to say I was shocked. I can't believe we were actually talking about this now. This, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe that would have been the time when I would have expected to see something like this come across. The fact that we've gone this far without having some way to hold elected members in government accountable for workplace violence or harassment, I don't know what to say. There's no excuse for that. So I fully support Bill 5. Every municipality should have a workplace violence or harassment policy and a system to remove elected officials if they are found to have violated it. As a councillor, I would work with basically everybody within to make sure that we have very clear, very strong black and white language over what is constituting violence, workplace violence and harassment, because there can be no gray areas on this. This is a common societal expectation, and this just, yeah, I'm dumbfounded why it is that we even have to discuss this now. Absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A question about housing in Barrie. Understanding that there is a homeless crisis in the city of Barrie, what services would you support to protect our most vulnerable citizens?
Well, I think it's very important that we objectively look at what data there is on the subject to come up with truly effective policies. Generally, issues in Barrie will also be issues everywhere else in the world. So there's going to be a body of data and research to inform on the subject. So I'm far from being an expert here, but rapid rehousing appears to be an effective strategy that I would support. Rapid rehousing provides short-term rental assistance and services. The goals are to help people obtain housing quickly, increase self-sufficiency, and stay housed. It is offered without preconditions, and the resources and services provided are typically tailored to the needs of the person. So I think that's something we need to be looking at much more closely, because, if you want to solve homelessness, I think intuitively the first step is to make sure everybody has a home. But thank you.
Great. Thank you, Allan. Sharon.
Thank you for this question. With the rising costs of shelter, food, and energy, more families and individuals will find themselves struggling to make ends meet and sometimes find themselves unhoused. Poverty has a trickle-down effect on children, health outcomes, and mental health. 1 in 8 households in our area are food insecure right now. Many of these people are working poor who have an income and job but cannot afford basic living standards. Ontario's minimum wage increased yesterday to $15.50 per hour, but the living wage, what people need to make to be able to afford basic needs, is $19.05 in Simcoe County. If elected, I would work with council, city staff, and community partners such as the United Way of Simcoe-Muskoka and the Simcoe County Poverty Reduction Task Group to implement local policies that would address affordable housing, education and skills development, transit, social infrastructure, and income security, and lead by example by implementing a living wage policy for City of Barrie employees. Thanks for that question.
Thank you. The next question is to do with food insecurity. Do you have any suggestions to reduce household food insecurity in Barrie? Sharon, if you can go first, please.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. People living on low incomes are in a chronic state of financial crisis, and many struggle to pay the rent and bills and buy food. This can happen to working individuals and families due to a sudden job loss. This impacted many Barrie residents during the pandemic. Food is then sacrificed to pay for other costs of living. Food banks and other food charity programs do not solve household food insecurity. If elected, I would work with council, city staff, and community partners such as the United Way of Simcoe-Muskoka and Simcoe County Food Council to advocate to the provincial and federal governments for income policies and programs that can reduce household food insecurity, to facilitate local level initiatives that increase economic resilience for individuals and families with low incomes, and to lead by example by implementing a living wage policy for all City of Barrie municipal employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allan, your answer, please.
Okay. So food insecurity, absolutely the points that Sharon touched on are absolutely essential. The one thing that I would add is just making sure that we are not wasting good food. By that, there is a large percentage of produce, especially, that is disposed of, that isn't sold at the grocery stores simply because of its appearance, not because of, is it good food or not to eat. Ultimately, if you're using a potato, if it doesn't look like, that perfectly marketable potato you see in the grocery store shelf, it's still a potato. It's not rotten. It's not anything else. It's good food. So we need to make sure that we are leveraging that. And in our last go over with all this, we actually did have it pointed out by one of the attendees that there is a program in Barrie to try and reuse that food as much as possible. So to be honest with you, I think the first thing that I would do is get behind that and make sure that there is as much access to low cost produce as humanly possible within the city of Barrie. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I have a question here about transportation. How would you direct a shift towards sustainable transportation in our quickly growing city? Allan, if you could respond first, please.
Well, I think first of all, we need to look at the city of Barrie's plan for 2051. We do have a lot of plan there for kind of an integrated vision of what our transportation needs will look like. First and foremost, the thing that sticks out in my mind are things like cycling paths and making sure that our communities are walkable so that people are not relying so heavily on I'm not going to say a built infrastructure, but they're not relying on a mechanized infrastructure like buses, maybe to the extent that they might otherwise. But with that said, I mean, buses and possibly light rail could figure into our future, perhaps more greatly, and those services need to be brought in when it's appropriate. I think it's very important, though, to start from making sure that a car is not a necessity to get around in Barrie. If you need to move a sheet of like a 4x8 sheet of plywood from Home Depot or wherever, sure, you use your car, or better still, actually use a vehicle that can actually fit it. But you know, if all you need to do is go out to pick up a prescription, then you should be able to walk to your pharmacy or ride your bike to your pharmacy and not have to hop into a car and drive to it. So what this means is that all of our transportation pathways, whether they are roads for cars, bike lanes, or dedicated paths for bicycles, sidewalks, all of those are planned with the intent of making sure that people are kept safe and they can get from point A to point B efficiently and, you know, within a reasonable time span. And then our mechanized service, so you look at our buses, that system needs to be adapted so that people are not taking hours to get from one point to another in Barrie when they need to go there. If people are relying on the bus to get to work and we're tacking on an hour and a half on either end of their day, if they're already working an 8-hour day, stick on an hour and a half at either end, that's most of your day gone. So that's something we do need to address. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Sharon, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Transportation planning is key to addressing many issues that Barrie faces, from accessibility, safety, cost of living, and climate action viewpoints. There are co-benefits of having a robust, resilient transportation system, such as improved health outcomes, better air quality, increased social cohesion, and lower servicing costs. If elected, I would work with council, city staff, and community transportation experts to consider the needs of all road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. Invest in public transportation systems that connect workers to employment opportunities. Ensure transportation, transit, and active transportation infrastructure supports our seniors, persons with disabilities, and people living on low income. And work towards that 15-minute communities to reduce the need for cars to complete our daily tasks. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And we have one final question for both of you. This is related to the supervised consumption site. As Barrie awaits approval of our first supervised consumption site, what other forms of emergency support and harm reduction do you propose or support to keep people alive, safe, and healthy? Sharon, if you can go first, please.
Certainly, thank you. The current opioid overdose crisis in Barrie is growing and tying up our valuable resources such as police, ambulance, ER healthcare professionals, etc., fueling homelessness and crime, and most tragically, killing members of our community. Safety and well-being are interlinked with community connection, The more a community is connected and is accessible to all residents, the safer and healthier it is for everyone. If elected, I would work with council, city staff, and community partners, such as Ryan's Hope, to institute a drug and harm reduction strategy in committee, working with our disenfranchised individuals and community partners to address systemic issues of poverty, racism, stigma, and discrimination, setting timelines and budgets to progressively work towards a 24/7 public washroom access, and to develop unhoused encampment strategies that do not criminalize poverty and homelessness. Thank you for this question.
Thank you very much. Allan, if you could please respond.
Certainly. First, I have to say it is disappointing that we don't have the safe injection site up and operating right now. So my hope is that that's going to be resolved in the very near future, because there is an absolute need for it. This is not an issue that people should be moralizing about or anything like that. It's about simple harm reduction. We have to make sure that people are not dying to the best of our abilities. And an injection site such as that is also a primary point of contact for people with addictions to get counseling, to get help, to get access to other services. So it is absolutely necessary, and it needs to be where the greatest need is within our city. So with that said, we do have counseling services in place within the city of Barrie, which I would support expanding and continuously improving to ensure that everyone who is struggling with an addiction is supported. I would also make sure that naloxone kits are available and accessible to all persons experiencing homelessness. I think it's very important to try and do these steps, but at the same time recognize that, these are really only stopgap measures. We do need to make sure that we have a coherent policy moving forward to help address the issues at its roots, but also supporting those who are struggling with addictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have one more thing to add that came in from the attendees in this sense of engagement. This is more of a comment and not a question. They just, and you both address this, the multiple unit housing and multiple family dwellings. And their comment was that they found the process of going through this was very difficult. There was a lot of red tape involved in the process, and they hope that moving forward, Barrie finds ways to make that happen more quickly, and they hope that the councillor that does get elected works on that behalf. So it's important, again, as you both discussed, too, communication with your team members, with your ward constituents is wonderful. With that, I'd like to give both of you the opportunity to take a few minutes to make some closing statements on anything that we may have missed, or just summary of information that you'd like to share. So Allan, would you like to go first?
Okay, I have 1.5 minutes, and I'll try and fill it all up. No. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to my fellow Ward 6 residents. As your councillor, I will always work to advance Ward 6 interests and ensure a strong voice from our ward is heard at City Council. I will keep lines of communication open, and just as I explained with regards to having quarterly ward meetings, I think that that's a key element to this. My wife and I have happily lived in Ward 6 since 1990, and I would be honored to serve as your councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Sharon.
Thank you very much. 9 candidates representing 4 wards were invited here this evening. And while it may not be obvious based on the low turnout, I am the only woman in that group, so 1 of 9. So why is that important? Yes, gender equity is an important goal for any democratic society, but also because studies have shown over and over again that having gender balance on decision-making bodies means that more viewpoints are heard and better decisions are made. It's good for business, plain and simple. But that is not enough reason to vote for me. Instead, consider that I have 30 years of corporate and management experience and 11 years on a not-for-profit board of directors. I'm a dedicated volunteer and community builder who understands that fiscal responsibility goes hand in hand with compassion and sustainability. As a retiree, I have the time and energy to make the job of Ward 6 councillor my full-time career. I won't promise to solve all the issues facing Barrie, but I will promise to be honest, transparent, and available to hear your feedback and provide a timely response. I have a balanced viewpoint that lends itself well to collaboration and team building. I have no hidden agendas, businesses, political affiliations, or conflicts of interest to influence my judgment. In short, I am the best man for the job of Ward 6 councillor. Thank you to Engage Barrie for organizing this event, to my fellow candidates, especially you, Allan, for putting their names forward, and to everyone who takes the time to view us live and in person or later on at their convenience. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you, Allan, and Sharon, again for your time.